You tried everything you could, because once I filed for divorce, I never regretted it. I felt like I knew I did everything I possibly could to hold it together. They had 3 kids, and one of the parents was coming right out of rehab. And the lovely thing about it was almost the scenario that I wish I could have gotten to in my divorce, where the parent that was struggling with that substance use issue recognized their own limitations, and I did not have any substance use experience in my family. I hadn't seen that close up like you did. And I think I was very naive to it, but I'm also an educator by nature. So I was just like, well, now I'm going to learn everything I can about it. And I always tell people, you've got to take care of yourself through the divorce. Go to therapy. Get all of this out at your therapist.
Welcome to the Just Separated podcast. Hi, I'm Karen Oman, a thanatologist, grief counselor, divorce strategist, and co-author of the Just Separated workbook. I draw on years of personal and professional experience to guide you through the challenges of your divorce. Together, with our expert guests, we'll equip you with the clarity, resilience, and tools to take charge and move forward with confidence. Follow Just Separated and join us as we explore the many different facets of divorce. So I did want to touch down a little bit about children, right? So you know this personally as well as probably professionally too, is we talk a lot about developmentally, how you talk to your children about divorce, stuff like that. Now, this is a little bit more of a bigger, I'm a child from an alcoholic. I know what was going on, even though I couldn't put the words or the understanding. So is there anything you can give the listeners on tips on what to say to the children, what not to say to the children? We know that children see everything, right?
And they remember so much.
Yeah, they do. So is there anything that you can tell them that way on that might be helpful?
Sure. So, this is really not even from a professional perspective. This is just from my personal experience with it. My kids I still had a kid in preschool when I was going through all this and going through my divorce. So my kids were quite young at the time. So just like you said, they knew something was going on. They could see what was happening. They didn't know what it was or what to call it. So at that point, when they were at that age, I would just tell them, Dad has to go to the doctor, or Dad has to go into the hospital for a little while and try to get better. And that would be about the extent of the details I would provide. And I just felt like that preschool, early elementary age, I felt that was appropriate. And I was also in therapy at the time, so kind of consulting with my own therapist about how much to share with them. So we would just kind of refer to it as his illness, like he's not doing well, he's sick, he needs to go to the doctor and he needs to stay there for a few days, or he did treatments that lasted 3 months at times. So I would take them to the rehab center to go visit him. We would have family sessions there, so they would know that he was there to try to get better. The details of which I don't think at that time they really knew or understood exactly what he was dealing with. I barely understood exactly what he was dealing with. He had dual diagnosis. He had multiple things going on. As they got older, now my kids, one is about to start high school and one is in middle school. I pretty much talk to them like they're adults now, because they have the curiosity and they have the memories and they know the current state, which they don't have any time with their dad at the moment. They see him maybe once or twice a year if we go out seeking him. But that's about it. And they will ask, they'll say, can we go look for Dad? Can we go try to find him and say hi to him on his birthday or something like that? And I have always, just for my own purposes as a parent, I have never wanted to be the obstacle that kept my kids from their dad. And I never wanted them to think I was trying to keep them away from him. And so anytime they ask me, I will say, yes, well, let's go look for him. Let's go try to find him. And I would always try to do whatever they would ask me to do with him. When he was really deep into his addiction, one of his parents would bring him over for a visit. And sometimes we would even stay outside. We would stay on the patio. And it just felt like not necessarily letting him fully into our home, but just having a little visit with a grandparent present. And if there were enough people around and there was an extra adult present, I felt safer too. So again, I always try to say yes to them, but they would know there would be times where we couldn't find him or we couldn't see him. But I wanted them to know it wasn't because of me. I'm now really open with my kids about addiction, about substance use, about alcoholism, because I also know that there's a genetic component to this. And I don't want them to fear it, but I want them to be aware of it. And I don't pretend to think they're going to abstain from everything as they get older, right? And so I tell them, if you make the decision that you want to drink alcohol one day, that's fine. I get it. But I want you to know that because your dad has this disorder, there's a chance that there could be a genetic component to that too, where you could be susceptible to it. So I want you to be aware of that you need to try things in mediation. I almost said in mediation. You need to try things in moderation and find out how your body responds to it. Because I think if you just create fear and think that abstinence is the only way, around alcohol or drugs, it's just not realistic. I think we need to prepare them for the real world. And I think it's okay if they want to try that out for themselves and see how their own body reacts to it. I've always been just like a really moderate alcohol drinker. I can't drink very much. I'm a lightweight. And so I just know physically I have a couple drinks and that's plenty for me. So I don't know what it's like to have that switch that doesn't happen where somebody, once they're having one or two, it turns into 6 or 8 or 10 because my body doesn't do that. So I think it's realistic for them to know that there's a physiological component to this that they're going to need to figure out for themselves. And, we talk about mental health in the same way. We talk about how there are things that, can happen in your brain, delusions, hallucinations. Like there are things that you can recognize are happening and you can't just bury them under substances because they don't go away. And so I have taken my kids to plenty of therapy. One of my kids loves therapy. One of them hates it, but I want them to know that like, you can always go talk to a professional about this if you're having a struggle or you need to talk something out. I want them to have that feel very normalized, very, early in their lives. So they know that they can use that. And it's not like they're admitting that they have some kind of issue. It's just a part of normal life. And they see me going to therapy on a regular basis. And I'll talk about like, oh, I went to therapy today and blah, 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 so I just want them to feel like that's a normal part of life. And it's good to turn to professionals when you're having struggles.
I just thinking about my own story, right? Like you think we talked about stigma, right? And how I love what you're doing with your children because you're making it more open to talk
Mm-hmm.
about these things, to be aware. I had so much anxiety in my own life that I put that drinking anxiety onto my own children.
Mm,
So instead of talking the way you have, I talked about, oh, you may not want to. And they've now, because they're young adults, have reflected back to me and said, Mom, you've caused us to have some anxiety around drinking now.
mm-hmm.
Right. And I'm like, oh dear, I'm so sorry. I have self-compassion toward myself because I know why I was like that.
Right.
But I think your approach is the better approach, where mine was more like, must protect, please don't drink, right? It's
Yes.
bad, right?
Because you've seen the horrible effects and you don't
Yeah,
want that to happen to them. So
yeah.
it's all just your protectiveness coming out. I think it's a very natural response. Right after my divorce, I did not have a drop of alcohol in my home because it became such a bad thing in my house. Like I resented alcohol. I kind of blamed the alcohol because I would hate finding it. I mean, I used to find bottles of alcohol hidden around my house when I was married, and it would just fill me with anger finding this alcohol. And so I had this really unhealthy relationship with alcohol because I resented it so much. And so I remember that first apartment that I got where it was just me and the kids, I didn't have any alcohol around because it just felt like a little evil presence. So I think that's a natural way to feel when you feel like this substance has, torn apart your life and your family. It's easy to put that blame on the substance. And it took me a little while to kind of get back to my new normal after that, where it's like, I've never had a terrible relationship with alcohol. I think I can enjoy a glass of wine again from time to time. And I kind of rebuilt that myself. And I think I'm kind of back to where I was before, which is I'm a moderate social drinker. And I find it enjoyable and it doesn't create an issue in my life. So I think I'm okay having alcohol in my house again. But it's been a journey, because you're always looking for like who to blame or who caused this thing to happen to you, and it's like, I don't want to blame my ex-husband because I think it's gotten so out of control for him. I more feel bad for him that he's had to go through all this and that he's made his life into what it is. I feel bad to watch him fall. And I don't know, it's like you want to place blame on somebody, but there's not really a person to blame. I think that's the hard part to realize.
So the tough question for you then, as a mediator who's dealing with couples like this, and the way that you described, right? Like, we want to be angry, divorce, we want to blame something anyways. We tend to blame each other.
Mm-hmm.
So it is going to be for the other parent. They could be in that emotional hot issue of, right? Because that would make sense, right? Like, you've destroyed this marriage,
Absolutely.
your drug addiction or substance use disorders, whatever is the problem.
Yes.
I didn't do this. So you would have to, as the mediator, in your, because this is your niche, right? Have to kind of explain to them or help them understand and work through that.
Right.
Correct? Yeah.
For sure. And as a mediator, we are trained to not focus on the past, which is really hard when you're dealing with these kinds of issues in a divorce because it is a very big root cause of why they're getting divorced. But we're not trying to litigate what happened in the past. We're trying to focus on where are we right now and what can we plan for in the future. So my job is to try to bring people out of the past. Now, a lot of times that's what they need to talk about in order to get to the present, right? So I will let them air that out. And sometimes in front of a neutral person is a good way to do it. So sometimes the first hour of mediation is sort of an airing out of the past and the issues so that we can get to the point where we can talk about where are we at right now in the present. And I always tell people, you've got to take care of yourself through the divorce. Go to therapy, get all of this out at your therapist, have them help you come up with strategies. Because if you start using mediation as therapy, it's really hard to come to a resolution. So I'm a big advocate of go to your own therapist. Maybe you went through couples counseling. I mean, I did. I went through couples counseling for years. I was a fixer. I was trying to fix everything. And I didn't think divorce was an option. So I was like, I'm not giving up. I'm not a quitter. I'm a fixer. And once you get to that point where it's not fixable, then you just got to work on yourself because that's really the only thing you can control in any of this. So I tell people before you go to mediation, go to therapy. Make sure you're talking about all these issues with your therapist. That way you can come to mediation fairly calm, fairly composed, and ready to approach it objectively. And that's a really hard thing for people to do. I can do it now because I'm 7 years removed from it. I did not feel this zen and objective about it 7 years ago.
And that's a thing that comes up a lot with when I'm talking to a lot of divorce professionals is like where we are now. But the reason why it's important to listen to you is you've been there 7 years ago. And so in my field, when we like, there's hope, right? We
Mm-hmm.
can be where Jackie is now, right? Like, look at everything you've been through, right? And so that's the reason why I love what you're doing, because it's important. I wanted to mention too, like,
And I'm sorry to interrupt. And you have to know that you can get through it
mm,
because when you are in the middle of it, you feel like the world is shattering and crumbling around you. And I know that feeling. And I want to be the person that people can look to on the other side of this to say, it does get better. You can create a calm home again. It is possible. You just have to get through this turbulent phase in order to get to the other side of it. I just had somebody reach out to me who I was friends with 25 years ago, and she had been following my videos because I post a lot on social media, just mediation videos and information about this process. And literally haven't talked to her in 25 years. She reached out to me and said, I've been watching your videos for months, and it's been giving me the courage to take the next step of the action that I need to take to kind of to recapture my life again. right? Because there's so much fear and it takes people a long time to arrive at the decision to divorce. And I think it should take a long time. I don't think it's a decision you should make quickly. I'm of the belief that you should kind of try everything you can before you make that decision, because then once you make it, and I'm a former college athlete, so I like to use athletic metaphors sometimes, like you left it all on the field. You tried everything you could, because once I filed for divorce, I never regretted it. I felt like I knew I did everything I possibly could to hold it together, and now I'm making the right decision going forward.
It also means when you're laying in bed and you're thinking about everything, is you're going, I did try everything. I tried counseling. I tried this. So
Yeah.
that's good CBT, right? Kind of going, okay. So you're starting to doubt yourself. You reframe it and you go, no, I did. We tried therapy. I
Yes.
tried this. I tried this. And you can sleep better, because I was exactly the same way. Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to try this, try this, try this. So then I knew that when I decided that was it,
Right.
and I didn't feel guilt about that part.
Right. And you deal a lot with grief, right? You have to grieve the marriage too, because you're grieving the future that you thought you had. You have to give yourself time to mourn that. And I know I went through a mourning through that whole process. I remember going, like you're talking about lying in bed and thinking about this. I remember lying in bed and going through all my family pictures, of us as a family of four, and knowing that it was over. And it was just, it is like a death that you're dealing with, and you have to grieve that, and you have to give yourself time to do that. You can't just think that, oh, the next day I'm going to wake up and I'm going to feel great and I got my new life. It's not that easy. And again, I can talk about it now because I feel like I'm so far from it that I do feel pretty great with where my life is now. But man, it's a really hard process, and you got to give yourself time to go through it.
Yeah, I also wanted to mention too, like I love that you said therapy, but I also they could also look into support groups,
Sure.
because the peer support model can be very helpful, like Al-Anon.
Hmm.
I think is it Coda that has certain support groups. They also can be very helpful
Sure.
to get the extra if they need more,
Absolutely.
because divorce is hard enough, and then add on top the fact that you have to deal with a substance use disorder with your co-parent. It adds an extra layer of I'm all about making sure your support systems are as strong as possible.
Yes. And you
And
know what? I tried a couple of them because I realized I was using my parents as my sounding board for a lot of this. And man, I was stressing them out so much because they felt so unequipped to give me any advice or to help me through any of this. I really made a decision. I was like, I can't keep putting all this on them because they're seeing their child go through this and they want to help, but they don't have that training, they don't have that knowledge. So I tried a couple of groups. I went to NAMI, which I don't know if you have that up in Canada. NAMI is the National Association of Mental Illness, I believe. And they have free group meetings that you can go to. And that is more of the, mental illness side of things. And then I did try Al-Anon as well. I did it when I was still married. And now I've heard that you have to try three groups. You can't just go to one group and make a judgment. That Al-Anon group was not for me. It was the most depressing meeting I had ever been to. And I felt that it was all people talking about their exes. And I was in the state where I was still married and trying to fix it. And I was like, I don't want to hear about all the failures or the failed marriages. I just wasn't in a place to receive what they were giving at that point. But again, I've heard that you have to try three different groups because every group has their own personality, their own dynamic,
Mhm.
and you're going to feel differently about every group. So I do think it's a really good thing to try, especially because there's a lot of free resources in the
Mhm.
communities.
And they're online, and if you can't, they're all over North America. I know that. Like I've sent clients down to Eric's house in Arizona, right? So, and they don't fly there every weekend to go to their support group. They just do it online, right? So there are resources. I just think it's another, if people can't always afford to go to therapy, there's also these
Mhm.
peer groups that you can do online. Make sure it's the right organization though, because this is pretty heavy stuff. So
Right.
before we wrap up, is there anything in this uh, area that you want to just mention before I ask the last question?
Let me see. I was actually looking at my parenting plan kind of guidelines that I put together. I think we touched upon all of them. Just being creative with your mediator, I think is very important because a lot of states have their kind of set parenting plan that they give you as a form to fill out. And a lot of attorneys and mediators use similar forms. And I do too. I start off with a template, But just know when you go to mediation, you can be as creative as you want to be. Now, one question that I've had thrown out to me, which I do want to do more research on, is how much of it is enforceable? Because if somebody breaks the terms of a parenting plan, you have to know, well, what do I do then if this can't be resolved? I always build into my parenting plans, if there's a future dispute, that they agree to go back to mediation before they take each other to court, because I always want them to be in that conflict resolution mindset versus, well, I'm going to take you to court because you didn't do this. So, but if they do end up in court over something, I know that it's important to know which of these things that you've agreed upon is going to be the most enforceable by the court, right? So I think that's something important to keep in mind, because a lot of people, I'll give you an example. Somebody wanted to put in their parenting plan that they can't post about each other on social media. I'll write whatever they want me to write in the parenting plan, because this is an agreement between two individuals. And a judge will most likely sign off on whatever you've agreed to. They're not usually picking it apart and throwing out clauses, right? So you can do that. But then if somebody breaks that and they post about you on social media, are you going to then take them in front of a judge and present evidence? And then are they going to throw them in jail for doing that? Probably not. Right. So you have to know that some clauses that you put into your parenting plan are going to be more enforceable than others.
Isn't that called reasonable something? Isn't there something like, like you could put in, like,
Yeah.
I was talking to another mediator, Jackie, and she told us, like, she's like, people put in, you can't date for a year.
Right.
Okay. She goes, I'll put it in for you.
Yeah.
But what if the love of your other life, a next life, comes and it's 6 months after?
Yeah.
The judge is going to be like, no.
They're going to be
that's
like,
not
live your life.
reasonable. It's a reasonable request up here in Ontario, I think, or something.
Right.
And I'm sure there's the same lingo in Florida and the States and Canada, right? So it's a really good point you're making, though.
Yeah. So I want to bring it up in the kind of vein of what we're talking about, which is building in those safeguards when there's mental illness or substance use, that kind of thing. That's why I tell people to try to give objective criteria in your clauses. So instead of having it be like, for example, if the parent relapses, then this will happen. Well, how do you define relapse? One person might say you've relapsed, the other person says no, I didn't. So how can we objectively define that, where we can mutually agree to what is the definition of a relapse? Is it a failed drug test? Is it 2 failed drug tests in a row? Is it a failed breathalyzer? Is it failure to show up to your psychiatrist appointments? You know what I mean? So the more objective criteria you can put in, the better you're going to be protected by that plan if something goes wrong. And then again, I just always recommend people should go back to mediation if there are issues that come up, because you can do a parenting plan when your kids are 3 and 5, and then new issues will come up when they're 13 and 15 that you did not anticipate. So I just always recommend people go in with that resolution mindset, that like, even if you don't know what the resolution is going to be, that you're open to considering a resolution. Because once you take each other to court and you're holding each other in contempt and you're doing motions for enforcement, you're doing all these things, it gets real tangled up. And then it gets very contentious when the courts are involved and people are getting served papers and people are having to attend hearings and show evidence. Like, that's where people get extra tense and it starts to blow up. So the more people can both approach it with that resolution and compromise mindset, you can go back to mediation anytime after your divorce. I don't think that it's reasonable to think we can consider every possible dispute that could come up while you co-parent. It's just not possible. So be open to going back and revisiting what's going to work for your family.
Also, it decreases anxiety and it decreases your costs, because I think a lot of
Yes.
people have to understand, until going through divorce, it's very, very expensive if you go that route,
Yes.
and exhausting mentally. I had a professor, Dr. Harris, who said that those very, very high conflict divorces, in her professional opinion as a psychologist and a world-renowned non-death loss professor, said that it's almost harder than a death loss because it just keeps going and going and going. So just a note to listeners. So I usually ask this last question of all my guests. And the question is, for someone who's just separated, whether they were left or were left, what advice would you give them to help them navigate those overwhelming early days?
This is what helped me. But I also come from an educational background. I've been in higher education for 20 years. I need to collect as much information as possible. Information helps me feel like I have a little bit of control over my fate. So I started doing research. I started reading books. I remember I read a book called Should I Stay or Should I Go? I read the Recovery Handbook. I read a lot of books. I had friends that had been through divorce that gave me books and said, here, read this. This helped me. Codependent No More, right? I mean, there were a lot of books. There are a lot of podcasts out there. There's just a lot of media that you can consume that can help get you in the right headspace. Now, you do want to make sure that you're following real professionals' advice, that you're not just following. I'm in a lot of Facebook groups about divorce, and there's a lot of bad advice out there. And there's a lot of people who are out for revenge. I would say stay out of those groups. If you find that that's the general tone of the group is revenge and get every penny you can and go after them, get the most aggressive lawyer in town, do all these consultations with every attorney possible so that they have a conflict and can't represent your ex. I hate all that advice. I am more of the mindset of how can we do this peacefully where it does not completely destroy our family? And having a divorce that lasts for years and that is $100,000, it will rip you apart from every direction. So I just say collect information, do your research, do your reading, do your therapy before you even take your next step. Because otherwise it's really easy to just react emotionally. And that's where people do get an aggressive attorney and they send them an aggressive letter in the mail. And then you're setting the tone for your entire divorce. So try to set a peaceful tone from the beginning. Talk to mediators like me. I do free consultations. Talk to people in your area that have been through it, that maybe have had the type of peaceful divorce that you hope for, and just be optimistic that you can do it. Don't feel like this is going to rip your whole life apart. It's going to be better on the other side.
Great. Jackie, do you coach like this niche worldwide? Like, I know you mediate in Florida.
Yes, I do.
But are you coaching, like if someone up in Michigan or Ontario are listening, or even in Germany or UK, and they say, you know what, I would like to talk to Jackie just for an hour to share. I just can understand do you do that?
I would be happy to. And I'll tell you, I wasn't even really thinking about taking this globally until you and I talked about it, because you really kind of opened my eyes to say, this is something that people all over the world need. And there's not really a lot of resources for co-parents that are going through this. So I am happy to be a consultant to anyone, but I can only mediate cases in Florida. But yes, I can be available for hourly consulting and happy to do that. I'm on social media at Jackie O Mediator. So I'm pretty easy to find. I'm on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and Facebook and all of those. I'm on YouTube as well. So I try to make myself easy to find. My company is called Quarter Tone Mediation. So you can also find my company. It's qtmediation.com. And I have services on my website, and I do free consultations for 15 minutes for anybody who wants it. If you're not in Florida, it will look a little bit differently because I can only do sort of consulting work.
Yeah, but that's why, I love having you on, because as I said, as we've said throughout, it's just such a needed thing. I don't want people to go through divorce, either the substance use disorder person or the other parent,
right,
without some understanding of how they can make it work, and that this is going to look different than the normal co-parenting. Yes. And that's the whole point of what we talked about today. So it was wonderful work you're doing, and thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much, Karen. You're giving a great space to this conversation, so really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining today's discussion with our divorce expert. Check out the show notes for more about our guest. If you're finding value in our podcast, follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and our YouTube channel at Divorce Workshop. Share your questions, comments, or guest suggestions. We'd love to hear from you. For a comprehensive divorce guide, check out our Just Separated workbook on Amazon worldwide. This workbook covers everything from emotions and co-parenting to finances, legal insights, and recovery. A must-have for anyone navigating separation or divorce.